The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Hello and welcome back to the show. We are once again diving into scandal today. When business systems go bad. Last Scandal Edition, we covered financial services. Today is our Automotive Edition. I'm Stephen Sakach here once again with Tullio Siragusa and Ash Maher. Hey, guys. So we want to look at scandals and systems gone sideways in order to spot trends. And typically we see a lot of errors with that sole pursuit of profit. We suggest that business ecosystems stay in balance when they pursue love and take an empathetic approach to all involved. So we are jumping into the automotive industry. So our Automotive Scandal Edition, we're first going to cover auto mechanics, of course. I mean, who among us hasn't felt scammed at one point or the another? Tullio, you and I are talking about this. How about you?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. It's the reason why I only go to the dealers. If they're going to scam me, at least I got scammed by the dealer and so on, right?
Oh, the Steelers.
At this point, I don't. I'm afraid if I get the cheaper one, he's going to miss a step, and then it's like, oh, it's on me.
Oh, Ash, you go to the Steeler?
I know.
I've
been told.
I mean, they charge $300 for a tire that should be like $50.
Yeah. I had one guy make an argument that I need to switch my tires out, and I'm trying to. His explanation was, "Oh, imagine wearing the wrong size shoe. Would you wear one shoe one way and then wear another brand shoe?" And I was super confused at the analogy. I ended up going to another person. They're like, "You don't need to switch your tires out at all. That was just them trying to sell you on new tires." I think it was $200. Yeah.
It's a good transition, Ash, into we're first looking at a sales quota system gone wrong here. So maybe there was a sales quota in play there trying to get you to do some extra work on your car.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Sears Auto Centers. In the early 1990s, Sears Auto Centers were embroiled in a pretty significant scandal involving fraudulent affairs. California Department of Consumer Affairs conducted an 18-month investigation and revealing that Sears employees were routinely recommending and charging for unnecessary auto repairs to meet internal sales quotas. Sounds like something we're all familiar with and worry about every time we go to a mechanic. So these practices at Sears were driven by a commission-based incentive system that encouraged employees to upsell service regardless of the actual customer needs. Imagine that. So the impact here, of course, the loss of trust. The investigation found that in 34 of 37 cases, Sears recommended unnecessary repairs, sometimes overcharging customers by as much as $550 per visit. This led to lack of trust and widespread consumer dissatisfaction and tarnished their reputation there. There were legal penalties for Sears, $3.5 million fine to the state of California to cover the investigative costs and establish a $1.5 million fund for auto repair training programs at community colleges. This is some sort of creative thinking here, trying to help out the situation. The company also offered $50 coupons for people. That's, why would I come back after you're giving me a $50 coupon? Nice try. The financial impact was a 15% drop nationwide in sales for Sears in their auto centers and 20% California. The company had to invest heavily in TV campaign to try and mitigate some of the fallout from the scandal. And then, of course, the negative publicity that came from this had a long-term impact on Sears brand, and not just affecting their auto centers, but the other areas of their business. So the company faced some ongoing scrutiny, and really there's not very many Sears Auto Centers anymore in the world. Tullio, prior to their demise, what did they do in response, trying to mitigate the problems besides the lucrative, enticing $50 coupon?
Well, before I say that, I just want to say Ash, when you go to the Steeler, I can't tell if I'm paying for a therapist or if I'm paying for a mechanic because their rates are like astronomically high.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if you're in the right business at $300-$400 an hour. But in any case, so what Sears did, I mean, this is the common thread, even in the last show. It's always the compensation structure that gets people to get creative and crazy and do things that they shouldn't be doing because they start focusing on themselves instead of the customer. So the first thing they did is they removed the commission-based incentives for service advisors. You would think you're in the service business, but they were like sales guys getting paid commission. So they eliminated that and also implemented salary-based compensation model to reduce the pressure for upselling unnecessary repairs, right? So, I mean, to be fair, here's someone trying to make a living, take care of their family, and their salary might be a little less than it should be for being a service advisor, but you can compensate for it if you upsell stuff. So you turn your service advisors into salespeople, and then they're just pushing stuff because they got to pay the bills too. So just a messy situation. So they stopped that.
You're kind of asking for it.
You're asking
for right there.
It's like, exactly. Where's the focus on the customer there? It's like the focus is on, here's how you make money. Get the most you can out of the customer, even if they don't need it. So they stopped that. And then they also instituted more focus on customer satisfaction. Surprise, surprise, you're in the service business. That should have been your first priority, right? So they introduced customer satisfaction as a key metric for employees and their performance evaluation. Now, that's a great thing to have done. Should have done that to begin with. And, shifting. So they shifted their focus from sales quotas to service quality. That's actually a great practice, period, for any business. Take care of your customers, create key metrics around that for your staff, your employees, and believe it or not, the profits will come. And then the other thing they did is they did some settlement and reforms. As part of their settlement agreement, they launched a national program to standardize auto repair sort of practices and enhance consumer protection. So they essentially got sort of forced into becoming advocates for doing the right thing to consumers, which is kind of like a nice way to slap someone's hands. Like, now you're going to do the opposite of what you were doing. So now imagine if they had put all these things in place to begin with, they would not have had all these losses. They would not have had all these issues, and they probably would have been even more profitable because when you take care of your customers first, everything else aligns as well. So that's what they did. But to restore customer trust and prevent similar issues like that, that was more of a long-term thing. The impact of something like that is long-lasting. In some cases, the impact is lifelong, and you can't change it. So, so some of those things, they just impact financial performance forever, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And in this case, there's only a dozen Sears Auto Centers left, I think, in the country.
Yeah,
so.
And this is an example where the fines were minuscule in the scheme of things, but the reputation
was everything. Yeah.
Hey,
it's just it's hard to. I mean, once you lose trust, it's hard to get it back, and you'll find that out in life in I don't know how many different ways, but hopefully you don't have to learn the hard way on that. But as a business, Sears, of course, they've had to compete with the likes of Amazon and Walmart and the death of the shopping mall. And, when you're up against it with competitors like that, Ash, we've talked about this. Your people can save you. Your customers can save you if you built these authentic connections with them.
Yeah.
But if it's inauthentic and you're abusing the customer, forget about it, right?
Yeah. And this is where they missed the boat too. They could have actually had a model that could have benefited their retail business. They could have had a model where instead of upselling repairs and stuff, they could have upsold like tools. Hey, in the future, you can do this yourself. We have a training course on how you can do this yourself. And here's the set of tools you need to buy to do it yourself. That could have actually been an interesting model for them where they would have serviced the client and upsell some of their craftsman tools and things like that, and potentially even teach people how to do certain things themselves, like an oil change. So they missed the boat on that. This is where people don't think long-term how they can create value for themselves and for the clients, just kind of like let's just get as much as we can out of the customer.
There's a recent example, probably not the best one, so I'm going to give two. But when you talk about customers saving a business, and again, not the best example, but just for the sake of this example, the GameStop, failing business, customers, it took one person to put out a message and say, come save this business. And there was a connection, from the nostalgia connection at the minimum, to users and GameStop, that they decided to go ahead and purchase those stocks and save that business. But a better example would be Whole Foods, where they genuinely built an authentic connection. And Steve, I'm sure you've heard this story in the book Conscious Capital, where they almost got taken out by a flood in one of their locations that would have put them completely out of business. And the community loved them so much, they all came together to put that store back together, because they couldn't afford to actually pay to get it fixed themselves. So it was the customers in the community that came back, and now Whole Foods became what it became into the future. I think when Sears went through what it went through with the dying of the mall, because of all of those unethical practices, there was no community support. There was no one coming in saying, hey, let's save Sears as the markets are changing. It was more like, no, this is, now those unethical practices are being weeded out of the economy in general. These companies could not survive when tides change. And I think that's another big thing to focus on, is that tides are always changing. So if you're having any unethical practices right now in your business, know when those changes occur, you might not be able to survive them, because your systems aren't in place to be able to handle those shifts and changes that occur in the economy.
Yeah, they aren't going to carry you through the tough times. Ash, let's switch gears and talk about the Volkswagen emission scandal, the issue, which went spectacularly wrong. Give us some background on
in the world we live in today, and we're talking about global warming. This is the Volkswagen emissions scandal. So they put in emissions cheating software. So Volkswagen installed defeat devices in diesel vehicles to cheat emission tests. These devices could detect when a car was undergoing emissions testing and temporarily reduce emissions to pass the test. However, during normal driving conditions, these vehicles emitted up to 40 times the allowed level of nitrous oxide, NOx. So the cheating affected approximately 11 million cars worldwide, including about 500,000 in the United States. The models involved being the more popular vehicles like the Jetta, the Beetle. I drove one of those vehicles back in the day too, which is really funny. How this system fails. So Volkswagen's corporate culture prioritized aggressive growth targets and market dominance over ethical behavior. The internal culture did not sufficiently emphasize compliance and ethical standards, leading to decisions that prioritize performance over legality. Inadequate regulatory compliance. The compliance failed to establish robust regulatory compliance mechanisms. The existence of the defeat device indicates systematic failures in regulatory oversight and an intentional bypass of emissions. And then ineffective internal controls. There were insufficient internal controls and checks within Volkswagen to detect or prevent the installation of defeat devices. This goes back to the example when tides turn. You have to imagine the world we're living in today, where everyone's really worried about what we're doing to our environment. And once this came to light, you could imagine the amount of the individuals that are actually fighting for the case of, making sure that we have a planet to live on for generations ahead, realizing they're driving a vehicle that has cheated the emissions system and was firing up 40 times the amount of emissions. That's probably detrimental to their brand, or it was pretty damaging to their brand, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it damaged the brand, and now you've got a whole market of people who are like, well, nah, not Volkswagen, sorry. But
we're all shifting to electric vehicle, as Elon Musk mentioned 4 or 5 years ago. It's like he said it's going to be a weird shift, just kind of how horses shifted to cars, right? It was an odd time. Well, we're in that shift. So now when we all go full electric, and Volkswagen has that horrible story that they were technically for climate change or for hurting the earth, I can only imagine how they're going to survive that when that becomes a total shift where everyone is eco-minded. You're the one brand that was cheating everyone back in the day, right? So why would we trust you, especially when that tide turns? That shift.
So I mean, they were playing with fire, got burned, maybe not, totally earth scorched with their business, but you don't know when these things could just go viral on you, and it's like a brand's worst nightmare. It's like, are you kidding me? What are we doing? how can I market this? What have you got? You got to just pull the rug under, half the ads we were running about why use a diesel car to begin with, I guess. But
I still don't get to this day why they did that. I mean, they must was it to save on emission controls or what, to make the car faster? I don't understand what the motivation was, but they would literally cheat the planet, not just consumers, the planet.
Well, I mean, that's a good point.
I don't get it.
That's a good point. We talked about, you mentioned conscious capitalism, Ash, and so part of that, one of the stakeholders you're looking at is your environment or community, how you're impacting that. So that's really, it's one key stakeholder of your operating, how your MO is to operating a business is, hey, how are we impacting the environment? And so clearly there was a culture disconnect, and clearly not this sort of conscious capitalism approach with that particular area. Tullio, what were some of the repercussions here for Volkswagen?
I mean, they might as well have had a board meeting sitting around a table saying, how can we sabotage ourselves here? Because that's basically what they did. And in the process, let's sabotage the planet. I mean, it cost them $30 billion to solve the debacle in just fines. Half of that were fines by the U.S., and the other were the European Union and other regions of the world. Just fines against environmental concerns, consumers, state claims, $30 billion. Now, on top of that, it's not just even about the money. There were legal actions taken against them with criminal charges pursued. So it's one thing you have a civil action. It's another thing when you have a criminal action. So, and some were actually sentenced to prison. So some people got jail time from this. And the company had to deal with a number of lawsuits for consumers, environmental groups, and also shareholders. I'm sure the shareholders were up in arms. And their reputation was damaged. It severely damaged their reputation. They lost consumer trust. The brand suffered, and this impacted sales and also market share globally. Mind you, Volkswagen has pretty large market share globally. So their stock plummeted once the scandal came through, and that erased billions in market value. So not only did they have to spend billions for fines, but they also lost billions in market value. And they also experienced decline in sales, particularly in the US and Europe. That's where they were like, because something like that, just kind of like you feel like duped and cheated by a company,
So again, if your sole purpose is going after that shareholder value, you just got burned here by not, having a more empathetic approach to everything you do. And that shareholders now, they just got the short end of it too.
Yeah.
What kind of internal changes, Tullio, did they do in Volkswagen?
Well, I mean, again, this is also consistent with some of the other things we talked about in the financial services space. Here, they changed several top execs, including the CEO, in an effort to try to change the corporate culture. Because my grandma used to say the fish stinks from the head, so you got to change the head of the fish. And also they try to focus more on a commitment for ethical behavior. And the new leadership instituted more transparency, more accountability. So that was the push. Let's get rid of what caused the problem. Let's bring in more accountable, transparent type of leaders. And also they focused on strengthening their compliance and control. They established a new compliance framework, including a comprehensive overhaul to its regulatory compliance system with stricter internal controls, as well as increased oversight and also regular audits to ensure compliance with environmental regulations. Why they didn't have that in place to begin with, it blows my mind, but that's what they put in place. And then so they pushed on a big corporate culture shift. They initiated programs to foster a culture of integrity and transparency. So,
and again, why didn't you have this in place to begin with, so that everyone?
Where were your values to begin with? Like, did you not have any values before this? What was the value? Let's just make money and cheat people. I mean, culture of integrity and transparency, great values to have for a business to work with. And then they started doing training on ethics and compliance for all employees. and a whistleblower system was encouraged, so that you can report on ethical behavior without fear of retaliation. So, big changes that when you look at it should have just been part of the standard of having good practices, good governance for running any business. And they also started investing in EV, electric vehicles, in an effort to regain consumer trust. They've been trying to position themselves as a leader in sustainable mobility. They've made a significant investment in electric vehicles.
They got an uphill battle for their marketing team there. It's like, all right, we'll try.
Yeah. We went from the guys polluting the planet to trying to save the planet. That's kind of a big shift to make. That takes time. Probably we'd be better off introducing some new brands and getting a fresh start. But those are some of the things they did. And then also worked on enhancing their environmental responsibility. They made a commitment to achieve more stringent environmental goals, reducing carbon footprint, ensuring better compliance and for the highest emission standards, and also got involved in developing new, cleaner technology to improve efficiency. And they succeeded in a lot of these things. I've had a number of Volkswagen vehicles, and so they did succeed. I think they're a better company for it today, but nonetheless, that could have been avoided. When you just focus on the customers, focus on the planet, do the right thing. These are good governance to have in place to run any business. Why in the world they didn't have them in place? I don't know what they were trying to gain by polluting more. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it ended up costing them billions of dollars and a huge impact to their revenue.
Got to hit those quarterly return marks there. Mm-hmm. Got to hit your goals.
It's short-sighted. It's like, and that's, again, it goes back to the conversation we had last week, which is, depending on the bonus structure some of the executives have, they'll drive those kinds of behaviors. It's got nothing to do with what's best for the consumer, as it is more what's best for that villa I want to buy in Tuscany. So
So let's talk a little. We've talked about auto mechanics. We've talked about the Volkswagen scandal. Let's talk a little bit about the automotive sales process, because for most people, I think this is pretty excruciating. There's a lot of things that go into that, but one of the things that even some of the dealers don't like, but that they've had to deal with, is this what's called stair stepping in the sales process. So this is an incentive program used by car manufacturers to motivate dealerships to achieve certain sales targets. So in a stair step, the incentive bonuses increase progressively as the dealership meets higher sales thresholds. So, for example, you might receive a small bonus for selling 10 cars in a month, a larger bonus for selling 20 cars a month, and then an even proportionally larger bonus for selling 30 cars. And these are typically paid out at the end of the sales period if the dealership meets or exceeds those targets. So you can see now you've got this kind of mark you want to make there. So what kind of problems does this cause? I know one of the things mentioned is that dealers didn't really like this, at least the small dealers, because they couldn't really compete with some of the larger dealers because they weren't going to hit those straight numbers, right? And the larger dealers were able to just lower prices to a point where it's just like, hey, yeah, same car, we're just 30 miles away. We can't compete with you guys dropping the bottom of the prices out of here, and we're end up losing money. So it's kind of a lose-lose scenario here. What comes to mind for you guys on this stair stepping process?
Well, I think it's also bad for the sales guys because the volume drives bonuses to whom? It drives bonuses to the dealership, not necessarily goes into the pockets of the sales guys. So it's nuts. You went from creating incentives to push people to sell more at all costs to creating an incentive to push people to sell more, but those people who are selling more are not really going to get the benefit unless they've got some kind of a pool that gets distributed.
Yeah, they probably have a corresponding.
But it just creates a model where if I don't have access to a large dealership in my area, I don't get the benefit of that. Right. So it's not really serving every consumer in every market. There's a disparity around it. I have no, I've been one of those people who have chosen a dealership based on this model because you're gonna get a better deal. They just have better aggressive pricing, and sometimes you're undercutting the local guys because of that. So there's definitely some issues with this volume thing. It disrupts market pricing. It creates an unfair advantage in some markets versus others. It has a negative impact on the customer experience. I could have gotten the same vehicle as a friend of mine in another market and paid a lot more. That doesn't feel good for me as a consumer. How come I have to pay a lot more? So it just creates that kind of thing. And also, again, high pressure sales tactics that just trying to push for volume. It's not the best thing for the consumer experience.
It's interesting. I used to work for a dealership, but it wasn't a real dealership. I call it CarMax because they had a different system in place where it wasn't about getting the sale, it was about helping the customer and guiding them to the right vehicle based on parameters that they would share with you. So we had an entire script of, instead of asking, hey, are you looking for a blue car or a green car? It's more of like, what are you looking to achieve with your vehicle? How many miles are you looking to drive? Do you have a family? So on and so forth. And then we give them options, right? The funny thing, though, is every once in a while, someone would come in with this mindset where they assume that any dealership you walk into, you're going to haggle. And I would have to take time to explain, well, no, this is a different system. We're not like the other dealerships. They're like, nope, you're just saying that. And I'm like, no, I promise you, like, I cannot haggle with you. There is no option. It's a button I push here, and this is what you're going to get, But they come in with that mindset. So I think what happens is that, to Tullio's point, the high pressure sales, someone does come in, that salesperson's if that person is trying to help that person, throw help out the door. It's not about that. It's about trying to get them the best deal. And now you're bickering back and forth. And you as a salesperson don't 100% know if you're really giving that person the best deal, but I'm sure you're trying to get that deal in any way, shape, or form. So knowing that it could be somewhere else cheaper, it's probably discouraging to you. And probably it hurts to go ahead and to say, hey, I want to help you, but I want to do what's best for me. I need to get this sale. So I'm not going to guide you to a better place where you can get it cheaper. That just disrupts the entire process. I can imagine the fact that car buying is stressful. It's for this very reason, right? Now, CarMax went ahead and created their own market, their own audience. They're dealing with their own kind of customer, right? Because they stuck to a system that works for them, that's based on integrity and really trying to help the customer. Unfortunately, you really try to help the customer in a dealership setting where it is running that way, where there is that stair system. It's a hard win. It's more about,
price
to benefit you. Yeah.
Let's underline that point a little bit, because this CarMax comes along with what is a disruptive system to this other system. So this other system, you aren't sure what price you can get a car for when you go in there. They're going to try and get you for the most, basically. Go to CarMax or someone with that different model where it's like you said, Ash, you're not empowered to change that price at all. No one is. This is what it is. And people just can't quite get that mindset. But that's why it's disruptive, is because it's kind of looking into the customer's best interest a little bit more. It's a little bit more of an empathetic situation. It's like if I went to the grocery store and I had to haggle for every little thing I bought.
I would not want to go.
That's how it used to be done in the village. You'd go to how many I bought a discount for 5 pieces of fish. You did it. You haggled for everything. So you got what you were able to negotiate, not based on it wasn't fair at all. But so
that would be that CarMax is like a solution to this kind of thing. It's that kind of model. Let's quickly change gears again. I want to talk, last week we talked about finance, and what we didn't get into is auto loans. But there were a variety of companies here that just have run into trouble with their system. So Ally Financial had to pay $98 million for a discriminatory auto pricing practice. I could throw Wells Fargo in here again. They even had people's cars wrongfully repossessed with some of their systems. This was from December 22. This is the Wells Fargo talking about their actually, this is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau talking about Wells Fargo. So Here's a quote. Wells Fargo rinse and repeat cycle of violating the law has harmed millions of American families. And so after Wells agreed to pay a $3.7 billion deal with regulators, the wrongdoing that went back as far as a decade, because we've talked about some of that with some of their other things, but as recent as 2022, they said. So it was, even after that scandal broke out, Wells is still dealing with issues here. And here's what the CEO said. It said, our top priority is to continue to build a risk and control infrastructure that reflects the size and complexity of Wells Fargo's and run the company in a more controlled and disciplined way. So it's like, those are words, and this was just 2 years ago. And it's like
sounds like a politician statement.
Yeah, it was a very political sounding statement.
Yeah, it's very complicated. We're too big to get it under control. But
we'll see. We'll see if they get it. Or it sounds like, something else could happen. We don't know. We're big, and I'm in over my head on these scandals here.
Exactly.
I don't know.
I have no idea how we're
I don't know
going
what's coming around the next corner, right? That's kind of what
we're doing the best we can.
Yeah,
it's kind of what it sounds like.
We're the victim. We're too big. We can't do anything about it.
So let's go to another one in the auto loan industry here. So this is Honda. They had a settlement with the Justice Department in 2015 that Honda engaged in a practice of discrimination. The government showed data that the average Black borrower paid more than $250 more in additional borrowing cost over the life of loans versus a white borrower with the same credit. Mm-hmm. The average Latino paid more than $200. The average Asian Pacific Islander buyer paid more than $150. So basically, just comparing this to white applicants in the same credit tier. So this system here was related to allowing the dealer to mark up the loans. And so whether there was bias intentionally or unintentionally entered the process, it just gave dealers room to do this. And this is what happened. This is what the outcome is. This is what the data was. And so dealers were kind of incentivized through compensation system and rewarded for marking up interest rates. So they brought whatever bias into the situation there, and this is what the data showed. So they got into trouble. One of the solutions here was obviously eliminating or reducing the dealer discretion in setting interest rates, because it's apparently a problem for people that they just can't see someone who's got the same credit, that looks like this versus someone who's got the same credit that looks like this without trying to, make someone pay more. So the takeaway on this one, I think bad systems can unfairly discriminate or allow that into the process. So it's a very important question to ask of your systems and really of your culture. So guys, let's summarize some of the key points here that we through these different auto scandals. So, and I'll just start there with that. First summary, bad systems, they can allow for either intentional or unintentional discrimination if you're not paying attention to that, especially in these auto industry financial scandals. Regulations are trying to be put into place to help mitigate some of this, but it's sometimes comes down to the system at me and you talking, and something's wrong there where you're just not getting a fair shake. So what else do we see as key problems from some of these systems gone wonky that we've just discussed here? What comes to mind for you guys as far as trends?
Well, I think there's a category of lack of empathy built into all these systems. That's really the root cause. Is someone's not sitting around saying, how can we better serve the needs of our customers, our employees, and even the shareholders, and taking into consideration the needs of people. And that's really what it comes down to. If companies prioritize taking care of the needs of people, they can never go wrong. And because to do that effectively, you have to engage with those same people and create user groups or consumer input into what you're trying to do in the marketplace. So that the other piece is lack of transparency. So, the more and communication and connection and relationships with those consumers. Because if you have empathy, then you're going to naturally want to connect and understand and be curious about will this work? What give me some feedback. And then through those connections and through those relationships, you can shape something that's valuable for everybody. And that's the root. That's the root of running a good business, or the root of not running a good business when you lack that step of understanding the needs of the people involved, all the people involved.
You know, there was a point in time when even my college curriculum, where the goal of any business, goal of any CEO was to figure out how they could maximize their profits. It was literally something we would read in textbooks back in the day. So someone who was really good at business in that time period was someone that really knew how to generate the most profit, make the most money. That was considered a savvy businessman. And if you guys go look at that character, and if you look at him in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s of what a good businessman looked like, it was always that tyrant, right? That person that was a shrewd individual who was able to max out what they could. But I think times have changed. I think today a good businessman is being judged by his relationships, his favor from his employees, the connections he has with his customers, and what the customers and employees all say back about the brand and the business, right? It's an interesting shift that we're seeing. So the individuals that were good at business for the sake of getting profit, there's really hard for them to find room in the marketplace. All these challenges are coming and arising from it, and we're showing that the markets shift, right? There's no longer room for that. But the individuals that put their customers first, I forget what the name of the company was. I think they were based in Oregon or Washington, but this was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. The gentleman, he was a CEO who took on a $70,000 a year salary, pretty much the same salary as the majority of his employees, to show him that he was no better, or almost as if he was equal. So it was more like a bringing them together, saying, hey, I understand where you guys are at. I shouldn't be making more than you, even though I'm the founder of the company. That was one shift that one individual did 4 or 5 years ago. And now that was a very extreme example, right? And I think a very extreme thing that he did. But if I were to look up that company now to see where they're at and where that gentleman's at, I'm sure he's completely broken boundaries. That was one of the new shifts of consciousness that was starting about 4 or 5 years ago. So I think people who care about their employees, their customers, they're being judged by their relationships. Those are the new businessmen. Those are the ones who are being like, okay, that guy is good in business. If he only knows how to maximize the profit, then it's not really fitting in today's culture.
So that, I mean, we've talked about it. It's that maximizing the sole purpose of business, maximizing profit. That's the Milton Friedman sort of ethos that came up during the 70s, 80s, like you mentioned. Let's add to that. And this is where I was thinking about this the other day. It's maximize profits with love. Yeah. And this do it with love. Because that's going to end up. So what we're seeing in a lot of these problems with these systems, we see that lack of transparency, like you mentioned, Tullio. We see the lack of integrity that was mentioned, with Volkswagen, Sears. We see these high pressure sales situations that don't take the customer's best interest in step. So that's like with the Sears scandal or the stair stepping we just talked about. I'd say be especially careful of the pressure of sales quotas, because people just like at all costs.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Stephen. Just reminding me, I had a really great sales leader mentor decades ago, actually. And he asked me this question. He goes, what do you think your job is? I went into this whole answer about creating value for the customer and solving their problems and all that. And he was like, no, your job is to separate your customer from their money. And I was like shocked to hear that. I was like, what? He goes, but you have to prove the value for why they would want to do that first. Right. So there was a consciousness behind, you're in sales. You're trying to make money. You're trying to separate your customer from their money, in essence, but consciously do it in a way where you got to give them some value for them to say, here it is. Right. So, and I think you hit the nail on the head. You can still be very sales revenue driven as long as you're driving value for that. There's an exchange that's equal, commensurate with the value that you're creating based on the needs of the buyer.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd word it quite the way he did.
Yeah, no, it was kind of gecko. The way he worded it was very Wall Street gecko. I mean, this is like 30 years ago.
but yeah, like I said, maximize profits, but with love. And so that would mean, hey, if I'm in sales, I'm looking out for my customer's best interest here. This is, when we talked about it last scandal show was, I could sell you this big $10,000 speaker system, and I'm great. I'll make an extra little bit today, but I see this guy has his pregnant wife walking in here next to it, the young kid. We talk about this as the ruthless people. So where's your consciousness involved? If you're not thinking about doing the loving thing, it's just another paycheck for you. Go home. Great. Enjoy the paycheck. What are we here for with all these systems if we're just looking out for ourselves all the time? Not thinking about our fellow man or human. At some point, when you get older, you're going to be like, what the hell did I do with my life? If I'm in that kind of sales process where it's just, like we said, ruthless people, right?
Yeah.
So, as we go through these systems, we're going to come back to all these areas of shortcoming and discuss solutions in a later episode. Again, Tuesdays, we do these topical episodes with the three of us. Wednesdays, we have the short 10-minute empathy episodes. And then Thursdays, we have guests. And if you notice in some of these guest discussions, we're getting into some examples of good systems, good structures that disrupt bad systems, and industries that operate on those bad systems. So trying to tie this all in together. Our goal is to help you find ways to build love into what you're doing. That's it for today's episode. We will see you on the next Bliss Business Podcast.